I think the best constructed camps in our area probably were over at Freeland, because Freeland had an airport that was just being built, and this is where the POWs were kept on the grounds of that facility. Some things POWs did in their spare time, the number one sport was soccer, especially on a Sunday afternoon. Ping pong, gymnastics. But there were those people who did not agree in communities or made their voices known about how they felt about POWs being there. For example, this is Ruth Blodgett Shutter, Concord, Massachusetts, June 20th, 1944, writing to the government. I cannot believe, and I'm stating explicitly, that our country should not make uniforms for the prisoners, and I can't quite believe that you could consider doing so. I firmly believe in respecting treaties and in the humane treatment of prisoners, but I do not believe in allowing them to Heil Hitler or have parties in their honor in the barracks. Other people were a little more blunt. Esther Smith, Havana, Illinois, June 16, 1944. Dear Mrs. Roosevelt, why did the President bring these prisoners of Hitler over here to Havana? They are a disgrace to our country. They won't accept responsibility. They won't accept responsibly anything to eat unless it is the very best this country can afford. I cannot support this. Then you also had kids writing to the government, asking for information. One gentleman that I had here from Detroit wrote to the government and asked, could you please send me information about Italian prisoners of war? I'd like to know more about it. And there were indeed Italians held in America, although they were a smaller group. And so these are letters that are in the National Archive. I found about 300 of these written from different people to the government, to the Service Command, President Roosevelt. You know, what are we doing feeding POWs beef? What are we doing giving them beer? Why are they saluting Hitler? I thought this was a prison camp. And all kinds of feelings and remarks about what they thought was wrong with POWs being there. Even POWs writing to the government itself. Anton Grass is writing from his camp in Kentucky, complaining that the commandant there, as he calls him, is selecting out Nazis and giving them favors that the rest of the population do not get. And when the government checks into this letter, they find out indeed the commander is very pro-German and pro-Nazi in his sentiments, and was indeed doing that. And here's a letter written from a teacher. I'm writing a book about Italian prisoners of war. I'd like to know more about it. The 5 camps that I mentioned in this presentation: Lake Odessa, Owasso, Freeland, Mount Pleasant, and Elma, St. Louis. Lake Odessa operated 2 different camps. It was known as Camp Number 8. It was in the back of the Reed Canning Factory, and there's still a factory there this day, and it sat in where these buildings are at here. It at one time occupied 50 military police at the camp. Initially, when it opened in 1944, they brought in 125 POWs. The goal was to get it up near to 400, which they didn't quite reach. It had 2 large mess halls and a shower. And in 1944, the prisoners were allowed to put in a pool, which they had purchased with their own money. They ordered the concrete and fashioned a very crude pool, which they put in the back. When 5 POWs escaped on July 10th, the commander of the camp ordered that the pool be destroyed, and they lost their pool. On Sunday evenings at Lake Odessa, POWs were allowed to wear their dress uniforms, and you had many soccer games going on. This is the back of the Reed factory right here. A couple of guards. You've got the background here for the camp set. These young men were in the camp at Lake Odessa, and one of them, I think it's this gentleman right here, came back to Lake Odessa. This is the cap that he wore. And this is his wife and his 4 children and their grandchildren. This gentleman, after the war, he and his wife got out of East Berlin from the Russian sector and petitioned the government and obtained citizenship papers and came to the United States and lived most of their life in the Grand Rapids area, not far from where he had been a prisoner of war. And so the family donated these items. And this past July, they had a presentation from the family, and they have an exhibit down at Lake Odessa Historical Society about the camp that is there. This is the post box, brief Kosten, which was used in the camp. It was found, somebody had saved it in a barn. It was used in the camp to the Germans put their mail into before it was sent back to Germany. Most of these men were allowed to write 2 letters, 1 postcard a week. 2 of the men in the camp had close relatives that could visit them, and 1 month 2 people came as far away as New Jersey, 1 from New York, to visit those that were staying in Lake Odessa. In 1940, a picture of the box. The following year, there was a great move to try and create another camp. Lake Odessa, this is Ionia County. Lake Odessa is down here. And you can't tell because this was originally a color photograph, but this half of Lake Odessa is largely muck. And so what you've got is you've got muck farms. And down here you've got orchards. And what this is a map that's been set up because the need for POWs in Ionia County led to the creation of the Fruit Grower and Muck Association that brought these men together, and they had to form an association in order to get POWs in the summer of 1944 and 45 to work in their orchards and on their farms. One of the men that was responsible for running between the Army and these guys was a man by the name of Don Holbrook. And this is one of the forms that I use my first day in class with students in history class, saying, take this document and see if you can figure out what is the message about history that you can learn from this. And what you've got here is a contract signed between the Army and a muck grower or a farmer or a fruit, someone growing fruit, and what days of the week, what weeks do you want POWs when they're available. Here you'll have to pay, and you're under liability in case you cancel, and that was always a concern from the Army. If you cancel, and of course a farmer looking up says, I can't be working in the fields, I don't want to pay for them. So there's a little bit of a tug of war going on between the Army and these POWs. And you can look down the bottom of the contract if you're up front here. I know it's for the bottom, but they have to pay so much per truck mile. And there usually is a 30-mile limit. And if someone saw a POW, or if you hear stories about POWs, the general rule is 30 to 35 miles from that point, if you draw a radius, you will find that camp where that POW was held. 30 to 35 mile radius. This is off our screen again. But it's a list of farmers saying with their phone numbers. Kids can't believe it. What is Belding 270? What kind of a phone number is that? Yeah. St. Louis 336 or whatever that is. You know, you have to call on the phone. What do you mean? Some of them don't even remember what a dial phone is. A lot of the kids don't. You'd be surprised if you some in class today would say, I don't remember what a dial phone was. I don't know. They remember push button phones. But now everybody has what? Good old cell phones. So. But anyways, these farmers are saying for these weeks at the top, they're marked between August and October. How many POWs do you want? The farmer here is saying, I'll take 15 this week for these days. This farmer is saying, I'll take 10. So they're having to sign a sheet saying how many they'll take. And they usually had a deadline to call in for this. And you can't quite read this down here, but what Holbrook has written on the bottom here is he's commenting about how hard he's tried to place his POWs in the last minute. Some of the farmers have canceled on him, and he says, it don't pay to plan ahead. Signed Don. Don Holbrook had quite a job, I think. He was a county extension agent. He's also working with POWs and with the Army. So it wasn't an easy job. What's unusual about Ionia County and the camp there is that we have some records. And what this is a projection for the camp that was never built. And in the summer of 1945, there was a move to build a camp at Saranac. And what Holbrook is having to do is project how many POWs he's going to need based on the previous year. And what the Army has said here, there's a minimum. And the goal was for every camp to function at 250 or more POWs. You can see here the month from August